Doodle Jump was a great example of that. Another example is this Angry Birds title. I don't know if any of you have played this, but this has been the #1 selling paid app on iTunes for most of the last year, since it came out in December of 2009. They just crossed over 6.5 million units sold. They've kept it refreshed with new levels and new downloadable content, and they're extending it to new platforms. So it's going to be on Nokia, it's going to be on Palm, all these other things. And they've literally spent nothing on marketing. It's simply been discovered and propelled through the iTunes store through all on its own. So you look at statements like this from GameStop, and you look at what they're doing in reaction to this. I don't know if you've seen this stuff about the store of the future. Have you guys seen that? GameStop's, as of this last week, their answer to this surge in digital distribution was they're creating something called the store of the future. And the store of the future, their idea is that you will go into, when you want to buy a game, you'll go into, get in your car, drive down, go into GameStop, buy the game. They'll have a digital kiosk there where you can take your receipt and either there or when you get home, punch in a code and get points, reward, loyalty points, stuff like that. I mean, it's, apart from the name, store of the future, which it should fail based on that alone, in my opinion. It's absolutely missing the boat. It's the classic sort of, the old rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. They are absolutely going to be the next Hollywood Video or Blockbuster. If you look at what's gone on in these categories, GameStop is going the exact same way, and I think most retailers that are 100% dependent on physical game sales, if you're a Best Buy or somebody that's got a mixture of stuff, you'll continue to have a game section there for the indefinite future. But if you look at what's going on, again, if we look at other parallel industries with Netflix, net income up 34%. Obviously, they eroded that based on a physical model, which was DVD by mail, rental service, but they're absolutely transitioning into streaming. All of Netflix's future energy is going into streaming movies. And so I think the parallels are really striking between that and the game world for digital distribution. So to summarize here, we're absolutely in sort of this hybrid stage between physical and the cloud, and that's this middle column that you see here with Xbox Live Arcade and Steam and Direct to Drive. We've been in that for the last 5 years, and we're just starting to sort of move over into this area where cloud is going to become more and more a reality. You're going to see, I think, a blend. The needle will move over time. It'll start out with, certain games will be cloud streaming. You'll always have your Xbox 360 or your PlayStation with the hard drive. Some of the games are just going to make sense for the next 5 years to have locally and run locally and install locally. But increasingly, that needle, I think, is going to move more and more onto the side of cloud streaming. And who that ends up being, it might not be on live. It might be one of the big existing players in the market today. But I think that's ultimately where things are going. So takeaways from this. Obviously disrupt, if you're in this business and you're looking at some of these things that are happening, physical retail, stuff like that, you need to disrupt your own business model or strategy before somebody else does, if it's not already too late. You just have to put on the big boy pants and look at yourself in the mirror and say, we got to do this, otherwise we're dead. And I think GameStop actually, if you're a brand like that, if you have that type of brand equity, if you really take drastic measures at this point to get in at a 90-degree angle, you can do it. But it requires that type of a commitment. Again, leverage whatever big brands, start building credibility right now if you have a recognizable brand. Take advantage of a lower digital cost by experimenting with more original gameplay. Another example that I didn't show here was Limbo, which for those of you who have been on Xbox Live have seen, it's this sort of really dark, basically a platformer, but it's beautifully executed, very artistic. It's all black and white, very macabre, sort of creepy feeling. But it was, again, independent studio created it. It only has about 6 hours of gameplay in it. It was $15, but it just got rave reviews because it was so beautifully executed and wonderfully executed. Nobody minded that it was only about 6 hours of gameplay. So there's a huge amount of opportunity for I agree with Sean's statement that there's always going to be, these tentpole games. That's not going away anytime soon. But what you're going to see, I think, is this amazing sort of middle layer of creativity that's going to flourish around this sort of $10 to $15 price range, where the quality of games that you're going to get at that level are just going to be increasingly impressive. And that's going to put downward pressure on the overall prices, because the quality of gameplay for that is going to compete with the $60 gameplay. And then, of course, that price for the downloadable content or the download-only titles will eventually move up as quality continues to move up and people recognize that. And then again, think in terms of the cloud, because it's absolutely coming. And whatever you can do to minimize as much friction as possible between you and your customer, you have to do that, because there's just too many other opportunities for them to go other places where the cost of substituting one for the other is completely negligible. And then to conclude again, we have, if digital distribution is not a core part of your strategy, again for the Dr. Strangelove fans. All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot, Chris. Just one quick question from me before we open it up to the general audience. You mentioned D2D and what you know about OnLive and Steam, of course. How does your company, GameStreamer, differentiate itself or make a special proposition that maybe publishers and developers would be interested to know about?
Yeah, thanks. We are positioning our offering as a, not only traditional digital distribution with the download to own sort of D2D online store model, which can be completely white labeled. You have 100% control over the relationship with your customer. So it truly is we give you the keys and help you build your digital business. In addition to that, it's not ready for prime time yet. I won't sit here and tell you that it is, but probably in 6 months, 9 months at the most, I would say, we have our cloud streaming available. So the same as Gaikai, the same as OnLive. So for anyone interested in that technology, we have the ability to turn that on as well and bring that to other devices besides PCs, including set-top boxes and things like that. So it's a combination of the here and the now, which is if you want to create a store that will compete with, direct-to-drive or Steam, plus the future stuff for the cloud streaming. We also have our own SDK for the developers in the audience. So if you want to start building in all of the social features like chat, matchmaking, and achievements and leaderboards and things like that, we have our own SDK, because that's what Steam does a really great job at, is giving developers tools that they don't have to recreate the wheel every time themselves to do these things. They can focus on building a great game. So we also, probably in September, are going to be releasing our own SDK, which will enable truly this to be basically your own white-labeled Steam.
Okay, great. Any questions for Chris? In the back?
In the back.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I'd like to put some quotes, fresh quotes this morning actually, from Kazurai, the CEO of Sony Computer Entertainment, who's said digital future is over 10 years away. It'd be great to get your thoughts on this. He says, we do business in parts of the world where network infrastructure isn't as robust as one would hope. There's always going to be a requirement for a business of our size and scope to have a physical medium, to think everything will be downloaded in 2 years, 3 years, or even 10 years from now is taking it a little bit to the extreme. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I agree with the fact that there's going to be, 10 years from now, parts of the world or markets where there's still going to be physical distribution. I think the lion's share of that will be digital at that point, especially in the more developed regions of the world. So I think he's accurate with that statement. I just don't believe that that's going to be a significant part of the market at all. I mean, even in less developed countries that you see Now, they're leapfrogging. They tend not to go through the traditional sort of development of communications technologies. They might go straight to 4G if the government in one country decide, and that technology is available and they need to build an infrastructure. So even areas of the world where there's not a lot of development in telecommunications now, I think, have the capability to move very quickly into a very advanced infrastructure where digital distribution would be desirable and possible.
Any others? One down here.
Hi, Alicia Dudek from SquareGo. You mentioned a lot about the volumes of content available to consumers, the frictionlessness of the transactions, and the way that consumers can so quickly have so much content at their fingertips. But how do you create a shopping experience for a consumer with this digital distribution model?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of tools can you use to do that?
Yeah, there's a lot of, obviously it has to be largely, okay. In terms of promoting newer releases and things like that, it's all very manual still. So you have people on your staff that are basically, or in our case, a service provider that does it for you, that knows what's coming out, that knows how to merchandise and create promotions around titles. So for new releases and things like that, it's still very much a sort of a manual. We know this is going to be big. We're going to push this on the main sort of section of the site. The challenge in terms of automation comes in this sort of the long tail or the catalog model, because you have in many cases thousands of titles, a lot of which are great titles that people, it becomes increasingly difficult to sort of wade through all this content and find yourself. So there's, I think Steam does a good job with it. Direct to Drive actually just relaunched their site, which was badly needed, to let you very easily sort of filter down. If you use travel sites like Kayak and things like that, you see a lot of this in place where they say you can essentially pick a series of filters, like I'm looking for first-person shooters that are under $20 that have 3 stars or higher. And as you pick each of these things, it just reduces the universe of options that you have to choose from down. So those types of filtration, collaborative filtering, things like Netflix does with, if you like this, you might also like, that. All those things become necessities for digital distribution, because there's too much content to really expect someone to wade through. Any sites that you see that have like a little line of pages at the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, next, and you're loading 30 of them at a time and then going to the next page. You'll never get anywhere with that type of a model. Does that answer your question?
To some degree, but I was more thinking about the instant gratification. On the one hand, that's great, a lot of consumers do want that,
Yep.
but a lot of previous experiences and purchases, you really want consumers to have a savoring feeling of having purchased something that was great. And there's more of a creation of that kind of relationship with your consumer. And I think that's a challenge in the digital distribution models.
Yeah, so you're saying the lack of sort of a physical or the lack of something tangible, right? Yeah. There's been lots of, there's little interface things you can do. Like I think a good example, iTunes did a really good example of that with album art and analog metaphors in the interface, like bookshelves and things like that. So that you still have the sense that you have a library. It's sort of a digital representation of your analog game collection. And then to take that, to give someone the satisfaction of like, okay, here's my library and I can arrange the boxes around the way I like. But once you go into one of those boxes, you do things that you could never do in the physical world in terms of showing all your achievements, showing comments, from the community of people that have done stuff recently. So you open up all of this additional content that you would never have in terms of really leveraging the connectedness of the digital world. You scratch the itch for the physical of, I have this collection, this is my stuff, I feel secure, this is nice. And then behind that, you try to tap in as much of the power of the community as possible to bring that to life in a way that's just not possible in the physical world.